We're about to dive into a story that starts with a tiny $16 refund request and somehow spirals into a global incident. We're talking AI, geopolitics, and the shocking revelation about the physical nature of the cloud itself. This is War in the Cloud, the day the AI went down.
It all kicks off with this one single, incredibly frustrated user. This quote is from a Reddit post that honestly started this whole investigation for us. You know, it's the kind of complaint you see online every single day. But this one turned out to be the tip of a very, very real iceberg.
All right, so let's set the scene here. Our story begins with one power user, a top-of-the-line subscription plan, and what really should have been a super simple customer service chat.
So here's the deal. A user is paying $100 a month for Anthropic's Claude Pro Max. The service goes completely dark on them for over 5 days. So naturally, they ask for a simple prorated refund. We're talking about $16. But after weeks of waiting, the response was a hard no. Flat out, no exceptions to our refund policy. A complete and total stonewall.
Now, this whole frustrating experience, getting locked out of a tool you rely on and then just being ignored by support, it wasn't some isolated incident. In fact, it was a tiny, tiny symptom of a much, much bigger problem. So let's zoom out. Because while this one user was fighting for a $16 refund, the rest of the internet was slowly realizing that their essential AI assistant had just vanished. And that triggered a huge wave of collective panic. And I mean, this wasn't just a slowdown. It wasn't some weird bug. On March 2nd, for users all around the planet, Claude just stopped working. The service went into a full-blown worldwide outage.
And almost right away, the reports just started flooding social media. This one from Berlin, I think, captures the mood perfectly. It's that mix of gallows humor and just genuine professional dread.
And this just shows you the scale. It wasn't a regional thing. We saw posts confirming it was down in Sydney, Japan, Toronto, Seoul, New York, Singapore. The list just went on and on. The entire global user base was completely offline.
This quote really hits home, doesn't it? It captures that sudden kind of jarring realization of how deeply we've come to depend on these tools, not just for big, complex things like coding, but for the most basic parts of our jobs.
So what on earth was going on? Well, the leading theory online was this idea called the success tax. Basically, the thought was that Claude had just become a victim of its own insane popularity.
And there was a number floating around that seemed to back this up. The rumor was that in just a few days, 1.5 million users had jumped ship from ChatGPT over to Claude. The consensus was simple. Anthropic servers were just getting absolutely slammed by new users, and the whole system just couldn't take it. But was that the real story?
To really get what happened, we've got to look past all the user panic and start following the digital breadcrumbs that the system's own failure left behind.
Looking at this timeline, you can see it wasn't a single crash. It was a cascade, a total domino effect. It started with simple server errors, but then it spread. First, authentication failed, so everyone was locked out. Then, and this is the critical shift, the API itself started to fail, which brought down countless other apps. Finally, the AI models at the very heart of the service, Opus and Haiku, went offline. It was just this rolling, 10-hour-long disaster.
And then, buried deep in all the Reddit chaos, a clue popped up. This user pointed out something that just didn't quite fit the whole success tax theory: damage to Amazon Web Services data centers. And this, right here, was the first real hint that the problem might not have been digital at all. Look, a huge surge of new users could maybe explain some of this. But the very specific, cascading way the system failed, plus these hints of actual physical damage to the infrastructure, that pointed to something else entirely. And this brings us to the absolute heart of the story, and a fundamental truth about our digital world that we often forget. The cloud is not up in the sky. It lives in very specific, very real, and sometimes very vulnerable places.
And here it is, the root cause. News reports eventually confirmed it. An Amazon Web Services data center in the United Arab Emirates was physically hit by projectiles, which then sparked a fire. The global AI outage was caused by a kinetic strike.
So here's how the dominoes fell. The strike was part of retaliatory attacks happening in the region. The AWS facility, which is a critical hub for AI processing, got hit. Now, as a safety measure, firefighters had to cut all the power to the building, and that includes the backups. And because Anthropic, like a lot of AI companies, depends heavily on these specialized AWS server clusters, losing that one single physical location was enough to make their entire global service just collapse.
You know, this gets right to the heart of the main takeaway here. We think of the cloud as this magical, floaty thing that's everywhere and nowhere at once. But the reality is, the cloud is a network of physical buildings, stuffed with servers, packed into specific regions. And those buildings can be attacked.
So let's bring this all the way back to that user and their $16 refund. This whole incident exposes a massive risk for any person, any company that has woven AI into their daily work. What do you do when your AI fails?
The technical term for what happened here is a single point of failure. In this case, depending on a single AI provider, which itself depended on a single physical data center, created this incredible vulnerability that just brought everything to a screeching halt.
For businesses, the risks of this kind of dependency are just severe. You get productivity blackouts, where entire teams are just sitting on their hands because their main tool is gone. You get customer friction, where your own apps start failing because the AI they need is offline. And you get these operational blind spots, where you're just stuck waiting and refreshing a status page, totally unable to tell if the problem is on your end or theirs.
So we have to end with this question. From one user's tiny refund request all the way to a data center in a conflict zone, this story is just this powerful, powerful reminder. The tools that are completely reshaping our world, from how we code to how we write an email, they're not powered by magic. They are powered by physical hardware in physical buildings with very physical addresses. And as we build more and more of our world on that foundation, we really have to ask ourselves, are we prepared for that reality?